After a while, you learn to ignore the names people call you and just trust who you are. Shrek. The Dragon Pod from Bending Not Breaking. Book 4, Earth. Chapter 7, Beneath the Surface. Welcome back to another episode of the Dragon Pod. My name is Ben Pruitt, and I am thrilled to start another episode. We have 3 more, including this one, and I've had like buzzwords this whole season: thrilled, incredible, all of these words, and that's because it's just like I feel like I have to repeat them because this season is so awesome. And we've had these lovely guests join us on all these episodes, and I have to say I have been anticipating this guest joining us for quite a while. So it is my pleasure to introduce all of you to Benjamin Callins. He has pronouns, is taking the world by storm with his performance of Terry in season 4 of The Dragon Prince. That's what we're talking about today. And his friends call him a cinnamon roll, and he himself proclaims to have really cool socks, which of course I strive to have really cool socks as well. So Ben, we are so excited to have you here today. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I actually came in here with a pair of really cool socks. They're sloths hugging bananas. So
Ooh, do sloths eat bananas? Is that a normal thing?
I don't know. I think it was just like a weird misprint of some kind. Like it was like maybe it's supposed to be monkeys, but someone didn't get the memo. But anyway, it's interesting. So we're going with it.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I currently am not wearing socks, but if I were, they would be hopefully cooler. I don't really have like sloth. I don't have any sort of sloth sock. But one of the gifts that I got last year was a
Mhm.
pair of a bunch of different like elf related socks. So
Oh,
like those are the ones
sweet.
that I usually whip out when I want to act the fool. So
That is amazing. Those sound spectacular. I'm so jealous. I don't have
I
any
usually
elf
just mix and
socks.
match, right? You got to mix and match and have them all like not match, or I should say. But
No, I feel that. Sometimes it's sloths with a banana and cat in the hat on the other foot.
now we're talking. See, like these sock sellers got to get on the right page here.
Yes, straight up.
Yeah, one day. Maybe that can be my side hustle as I finish up grad school, is to start a rando sock company.
That is amazing. I love it. I love it.
Well, at least I'll have one customer. Oh man. Okay. Well, aside from the incredible sock revenue, like repertoire, what are some things? Just tell us a little bit about you for the people who've never heard your voice, who don't. Well, I guess they've heard your voice there if they're listening, but who don't know you very well. What are some things that make you you?
Um, well, I have so many hobbies, it's insane. I'm very much a hobby person. I thrive off of just doing things constantly. I'm a cat dad. I am a singer. I also draw. um and I like to incorporate a lot of that into my work as well, so like I think even though like people generally steer away from work when talking about themselves, I think work makes up a lot of who I am because I love what I work on and I've just been doing it forever. So
Interesting. So, like, when you say work, I want to.
mhm.
What does that mean to you? Do you mean just like the way that you earn money, or do you mean it in another way?
Yeah, like acting and singing and art and stuff like that. This all those things I do. I do have somehow made a profit off of it. So
One
I
of the
consider
few.
those things my work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, like I think that's incredible, and as a creative myself, like am just envious of the people who are willing to commit really to art as a way of life, right? And I admire that about you. So thank you for
Thank you.
continuing to create and put your work out into the world.
Oh, thank you very much. So kind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So part of your work is to create. I'm hearing that you do all kinds of things: sing, draw. You clearly voice act, uh,
Yeah.
and act in general. So how did you find the Dragon Prince? I would love to hear any sort of story related to how you got involved with the Dragon Prince.
Well, before I auditioned for the show, I was actually a fan of the show, and I used to watch I used to
That's
watch the show with
awesome.
my brother, and we enjoyed it a lot. I remember it was the first season came out. We finished it in one night. We were like, wow, that was so awesome. That was so cool. And at the time, I was just starting my voice acting stuff. I just wanted to start getting into it. And so I was like, dang, that is so cool. I wish I could do that someday.
That's
And
so cool.
funny enough, it was great.
Wow.
I loved the show. And I love high fantasy stuff. It's always my favorite, like Dungeons and Dragons, all that kind of stuff. It's always like one of those things that's just like, yes, I love it. So the Dragon Prince, I was immediately a fan of.
Yeah, I am similar. I am very much a fan of high fantasy. Or do you like to read? Do you have any favorite other high fantasy stories that you're like, this is the so good. You can't miss this.
I suck at reading. I'm the worst reader ever. My
No,
attention
yeah,
span is a walnut, but I will sit down and I will watch the whole extended edition Lord of the Rings trilogy.
I recently rewatched those.
Yeah. I
That was,
can't sit down and read, but I can sit and watch.
yeah. All right. Okay. So we have the Dragon Prince is the must watch here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, if they're listening to this, they understand. Um, okay. So you found, like, we were talking with one of the writers too, who like was a fan of the show and then became a writer for the show. Like, how cool is that for a lot of
Yeah.
all these people that got to like join? Oh, just makes me like cool. Anyway, okay. Um, what we'll do now is we've heard a little bit about you, clearly this wonderful creative. And now what I want to do is go into like our first segment, our first real segment, which is the primal source. And
Right.
of course, you are our primal source. And what I'd love to hear is like, it's really nice for our listeners to like learn little things about what happens behind the scenes. And I admit that I
Right.
learned a great deal of like everything that's involved in the making of a show by asking some of these questions. And so it's been fascinating to hear. And I
Yeah.
just love to hear from your perspective. What is something that was fun or interesting or weird about the making of this episode?
um, I actually remember stepping into the booth to record this episode. Um, and Jason, he jumped into the Zoom call because we recorded over like a Zoom. So he would be in, we have a studio. I'd be in studio A, it's like one room, and then he would be in studio B for like COVID protocols. So that's just, we'd be in two different rooms, but we could see each other over a Zoom call, and that's how Aaron and
That's
everyone
so
and the
nice.
writers could see us as well. And so I remember being in the booth and then Jason jumping into the booth and just seeing him over the Zoom call, and he started singing a song, and he started trying to make me sing sing a song with him, but I didn't know the words.
What song?
Um, it was Blue. I think it was. I could be remembering this wrong, but I think it was Blue Skies by Willie Nelson. And he
That
was
sounds
just
like,
singing. He was like, "Come on, Ben, sing with me." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what we're singing." Well, it was, yes, it's great.
oh man, oh that's funny. You know, he's never attempted to sing for us. We're missing out. Like he's
No
been there
way.
several times and he hasn't tried
Oh,
to sing.
Jason is such a great singer.
Oh, the cat's out of the bag now, y'all.
He
Turns
is.
out
He's a fantastic singer.
what we're gonna do is we're gonna recruit him to do like a Patreon special of like just singing a little song.
That, yes, you should absolutely.
Oh dang.
Oh gosh, there's a lot of like things I could tell you about the behind the scenes for this particular episode, because there's so much like that scene where Terry stands up to Viren and says like, "Hey, I'm gonna have feelings and feel what I need to feel." Like that whole massive
What a
segment
cool
that Terry
scene.
says, Oh, absolutely. That was part of my audition for Terry. And when I
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
when I first recorded the audition and sent it in, it barely changed in the final outcome, like the delivery and everything. Having the context behind it, it was just like for some reason that whole experience was already there in the I'm gonna feel what I need to feel. And despite getting to know Terry better, it kind of like the whole sorry the whole way I read the scene stayed the same, which is really interesting because sometimes you get
Yeah.
context and it changes and stuff like that. But it was kind of like I knew Terry already, like
Wow.
despite it just being an audition.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. I can imagine the creative process of wanting to, woodshed and be like, okay, I'm gonna craft this down and like hone it down to be just right. And then to find out that like, oh dang, I nailed it.
You're right.
Like, how cool is that? That's so uh
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking, it's like not serendipitous. It's almost like a window into the character in a way that like could only be you could only guess at before actually getting the context, and then you get the
Right.
context and you realize that you read that so well. Wow, that's so gratifying in a way. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That what a cool story too. Like, oh, this I'm just I have to go rewatch it now again. For like the 10th time. Okay, so we are talking about this episode, and you've already brought up a really neat scene, which is super super great. And I want to give everybody else that's listening context for the lens that we're going to be talking about, which is trust today. So you chose this lens, and I would love it if you could just help me understand, what does trust mean to you, and then I'm going to stop there. What does trust mean to you?
Gosh, trust is such a powerful, powerful thing. Because you never know if you're trusting the right person, and that's so scary. And trust takes so much like bravery. It takes especially if you've trusted the wrong person before. And it's one of those things that's
Yeah.
just powerful and brave and scary, but can also just it can be such a relief, having someone to trust and just feeling safe with that person.
Ooh, so I'm hearing two sides to this. One is, in order to step into trust, it requires a lot of bravery, it requires a lot of courage. But then on the other side, once you have it, it feels like a safety net almost. I don't want to put words
Yeah.
in my mouth, but that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's almost this duh. It's like a leap of faith, so to speak. Uh,
Really, yeah, it really is.
where where you can't know if you're going to get caught by a safety net or not.
Mm.
You're just jumping and hoping that you'll get caught. Kind of like, I just had this vision of Callum jumping off the storm spire and like, I'm gonna have wings eventually. um, yeah,
Yeah, I
this is
absolutely.
really interesting way to frame trust. Yeah, that's great. So when I mean, we all have lots of moments. Like, I think trust is one of those experiences that is pretty integral to the human condition, meaning like everyone experiences
Yeah.
trust and a lack of trust. And one of the things I heard from you was that it is it requires a lot more bravery if you have been hurt before by a lack of trust.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, if you could just unpack that just a little bit more.
For like my own personal experience or like
Yeah, or if you would just to speculate about that as a general thing.
yeah. Well, if I wanted to use an example, Terry coming out to Viren as trust, you know, coming out is such a scary thing, and like trusting someone that like they're gonna hold on to that for you, and they're gonna be like a safe space for you to do that. Especially when you just met them too. Like that can be really scary. And
Absolutely.
I've had instances in my past where I wasn't ready to come out to my family or something like that, and I unfortunately trusted the wrong person, and that person relayed a lot of information I wasn't ready to share yet with members of my family who weren't ready to hear it.
Yeah.
And so
That can be
things like
really
that can be really, like, it's hard, it's really hard, to find that, like, that trust again,
hard.
you know
Yeah,
and you know it's there, and I'm so grateful for all the people I have in my life. I'm very supported, but it's scary. It's a scary thing.
absolutely. Okay, so before we dive too deeply into this scene that you've given us, we want to make
Mhm.
sure that we remind our listeners of what happened in this episode. And so I'm going to do a 30-second countdown, or a 3-second count. And we're going to have a 30-second recap time. And so I'll go first out of the generosity within my heart. I'm going to go first. And then you will have 30 seconds on the clock as well, to kind of cover the things that happen in this episode to the best of your memory.
Okay.
I will warn you, everybody who's gone before you is like, it's so hard the first time. I promise you'll be great. Don't worry.
Thank you.
I'm going to put 30 seconds on the clock. Will you do me a favor and
Sure.
count me in from 3
Okay.
whenever you're ready?
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so Nathan is like, peril, death, it's imminent. And then, there's this beautiful crystal palace, and there's only 3 quasar diamonds known in the world. And then the music and lights light the way. And then Soren chases Claudia down in PJs and ties her up. And then she gives him the silent treatment. And then Terry worries for Claudia, and Viren's like, no, it's fine. And then there's a dark abyss area, and like, oops, light. And then they run, and then Claudia breaks the silence, and then some scary things. And then the breeze dome. And then that's like, wow. And then Callum's scared of the darkness, and Viren and Terry go to find Claudia to talk about the past. 30. I went over by like 0.8, but that's okay.
That was beautiful. I am not going to be able to execute that as fantastically as you did.
I believe that you will execute. Are you ready?
I am ready as I'll ever be.
All right, on the count of 3, 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, Nathan is guiding them through the caves and trying to find like the case hard diamonds. Woo, it's all really pretty and shiny. And then the Soren chases down Claudia and ties her up. And then she's giving him like she's mad at him, so she's giving him the silent treatment. Terry and Viren have like a little conversation, and then they worry about Claudia more. End up walking along to try and find Claudia. Oh God, Claudia breaks free. Things get crazy. Oh no, it's Viren. Yay.
Ding. Well done. Yeah, I thought that was well done. You did great.
It's a disaster, but thank you.
No, it was great. Yeah, I think we covered it. I think we nailed it.
Yeah.
With our powers combined, we did an incredible job.
It's great. It's great. Thank you.
Okay, so this is where I'm really excited to just dive into some of the moments that happened in this episode, talking about trust. And so, as you were thinking about what happened in this episode, what is a moment of trust that you want to just talk about right off the bat?
Oh, absolutely. The coming out scene between Terry and Viren is, again, I probably sound like a broken record, but the amount of trust it takes to come out to somebody, especially someone you just met, like you don't know how they're gonna react. And of course it's the Dragon Prince, and the Dragon Prince is always like, great with support and stuff like that. But in the real world, it's a scary, scary, scary thing. There are some scary people out there, and that moment immediately for me was just something that was so touching. And so like I think it was the just the simplicity in the scene, with like the added feelings to what was being said. It was so beautifully done. And that moment of trust is just,
Yeah.
it's so special to me and so many others, I think.
So I have a question. I'm curious about the way you phrased that. You said it was this scene was beautifully done.
Yes.
And I'm there's a lot of things that I heard like through the between the lines, so to speak, in what you were offering us. And so I'm curious from your perspective before I, color it with mine. What was particularly beautiful about the way that it was done to you?
Gosh. Well, I guess I do have a lot of like inside knowledge
Yeah.
too on this scene. So I can I share a bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there were lots of conversations with trans folks from GLAAD, and there were different renditions of the scene beforehand, and it wound up changed to be what it is now. And Aaron was very clear to me that, like, this scene was like kind of my moment, and he made sure that like my opinion was heard. So he asked if I was okay with how it turned out, or
That's
asked
incredible.
me if I wanted to change or try anything. But I remember, like, I loved the way they wrote it so much that I didn't want to change a thing. I remember being in the studio and just like having to take a few deep breaths before we recorded that moment, because I was just so touched and brought tears to my eyes with like the simplicity and love and trust in just the writing and just in the team environment as well, right? Because it's not just Terry trusting Viren. It's me trusting them to do right by a trans
Yeah.
character, because there's so many wrongs in media when representing those kinds of things. So just the trust, like the trust was so many different ways, not just in the show, but outside of the show too, in the
Yeah.
writing, in the people, in the environment, and just getting
Super
to see it
meta.
all. Yeah, right, exactly. um and it was just when I finally saw the scene all put together with like the fireflies in the background and just the beautiful surroundings and colors, I was like weeping. I was like, oh, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, I this is particularly interesting because it's not often that the person who is voicing the character has been through something quite so similar as the character, especially in high fantasy environments, right? So
Oh, for sure.
this to me is really interesting to hear because it sounds like you as Ben felt a lot of trust in this moment, and that came through not but for also Terry, who experienced a lot of trust in this moment. um so yeah, what a beautiful experience, to use your language. Like, wow, I'm kind of
Yeah.
grateful that that was the experience you had rather than something else with it.
Oh, absolutely. This is such a scary thing, because people can say they're gonna do right by you, with things like that, and
Yeah,
then they flop.
yeah.
And they don't do it right, and they don't listen to you, and they don't listen to the right people. But you know everyone on the team made sure that they were listening to the right people. They were listening to trans people and their
Mhm.
ideas. And like when something, there was a little like slip in the script. I believe it was like Terry revealing his dead name. That
Mhm.
was mentioned at first, but people were like, no, let's leave that out. Let's leave it like, Terry just chose his name for himself, right?
Yeah,
Because it could give transphobic people ammunition against Terry. And
yeah,
that's exactly what they didn't want. So them reaching out and saying, hey, like we're listening to you. What do you think we should do with the scene? They were like, take his dead name out. And they were like, okay, let's do that. They took it out. They listened, and they like, just didn't give anyone anything to like like didn't give anybody ammunition,
yeah.
and that's such a powerful thing, to make
I
sure that you, yeah,
That was
just
the first thing when you lifted that up. I was like, oh no, if they had included that, I could just imagine the vitriol on social media that would have happened from transphobic
mhm,
people.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. And just a trans character being there, there's the opportunity for transphobia. There has been transphobia. I've seen it, and I've moved past it. But there's just having that ammunition there is so scary. And if Terry wanted to trust Viren with his dead name, like, that's okay. Like, I trust people with my dead name if I know them like really well, things like that. Like, it's a trans person's choice, right? So I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but it could have given people you
Yeah,
know, just
absolutely.
ammunition.
And I'm putting this out for I think Terry, but also I think just the trans experience too,
Mhm.
and not just the trans experience, but the queer experience. It's like thinking about what being queer and the requirement of coming out of the closet. Uh,
Right.
Part of the requirement is that you have to have trust, right? You have to have built up this trust, and there is that is an unseen tax on queer folks.
Yeah.
And what people who don't experience that tax realize is that that is an unseen thing, like, right? And so
Oh, absolutely.
the idea that um oh, like, why is this so difficult? Well, let's think about the times when you've had to experience that level of trust for fear of what could be a multiple of number of things. And we don't know what Terry's experience is in this world, right? We don't have much of the backstory. At least we as viewers do not have much of the
Right.
backstory for what Terry might have experienced from his family, from his experience growing up, and from the people in the world that may or may not be as accepting as Claudia and or Viren. And it's interesting to me to think about trust being one of those commodities that straight people, for instance, white people, for instance, just
Mm.
like pretend exists for everyone when really they don't understand
Right.
that there's something missing there.
No, absolutely.
And so part of what I hope we learn from Terry's future experience is what is the climate in this world, and is it as bad as it is here?
Mm.
And if so, then it requires a lot more trust from Terry than we can probably recognize, right?
Right.
Um, which is, I think, regardless, we can appreciate this scene more if we like kind of highlight that as something that is a tax upon people who have to go through this a day in,
Mhm.
day out on a regular basis.
Yeah, for sure.
So can we talk about Terry's language? Like, you offered us a little bit in terms of your reflections, but just to be more specific, Terry uses metaphor in
Yes.
his explanation of this. Like, he reminisces about like people used to see him as a doe versus him knowing that he was a buck.
Mhm.
And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the use of metaphor here. And I'll pause there before I keep going. Like, how did that feel to you?
Honestly, I got the message like loud and clear, and I knew the people the people who could relate to Terry would also understand um big time. Being trans is really scary, and sometimes you don't want to say things like as they are for the fear of like people like reacting really badly. So like him
Yeah,
using that like that metaphor, like everyone saw me as a doe, but I always knew I was a buck, like that. Instead of saying, oh well, I was born a girl, and like now I'm a boy.
yeah.
I think the metaphor added a bit of like simplicity to it, like
Mhm.
gave a gave like I know there were some translation errors for
Just
the other languages where some it apparently didn't make a lot of sense.
mm,
um which was a bit unfortunate, but I just think the way he said it was so simple and yet
yeah.
beautiful.
And I 100% agree. I am a huge metaphor fan. If this whole podcast isn't a clue, but like thinking about in terms of thinking about metaphor in terms of trust, I think oftentimes metaphor is a useful buffer when we are feeling vulnerable.
Oh, for
And
sure.
right. And so in a way, metaphor allows us to be more to tap into trust more readily, right?
Mhm.
In a way, like I feel like if I can, uh, for lack of a better word, like soften the blow, um,
Yeah.
then I'm more likely to be able to do this. And therefore, I can trust you a little bit more if I can use metaphor to tell you what
Mhm.
I'm trying to tell you. And I guess that was why I lifted that up, because I was thinking about that in relation to trust. And I was like, dang, I hadn't thought about it in that kind of way before. And I thought that was really
Right.
neat.
Yeah. I think a big part of it could also just be because Terry is an Earthblood elf, and it's very
Right?
like,
Yeah.
maybe that's like the lingo they kind of use, but
Mhm.
I do agree that like the metaphor there is very like to soften like what he was trying to say and make it like not easier, but like just like not easier to understand, but easier to take in, I guess.
Oh, so there's two sides to it then. So there's one side of like it makes it easier to say, maybe, or
Mhm.
thinking about it from the other side of it makes it easier to hear.
Right.
Which I mean, and I think that Terry very well may have considered both. And we don't know, right? I oftentimes, again, it's
Yeah.
the burden is on the person who has to come out, right? And so oftentimes that person is very aware of like how it sounds to
Absolutely.
themselves, and then they're extra conscious of what are they going to think when I say it. Oh, if I say it this way, oh gosh. And so there's this like, again, this tax that is required.
Right.
So there's a lot wrapped up in this, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to kind of um dive into this with me. There's just so much going on. I One of the things that I was thinking about when in this scene too is that trust requires a little bit of groundwork.
Mhm.
And what we see is that Terry and Viren have been like, Terry has been trying to buddy Viren this whole time, right? Like I'm gonna warm up to you whether you like it or not. And right, like so it seems like he desperately wants Viren's approval. Maybe
Mhm.
that's the wrong language, but is very interested in Viren liking him because he's so smitten with Claudia.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so part of me wonders how Viren would have handled this news if, let's say, Terry is like, I'm out and proud and I don't care who knows. And I'm very curious how Viren would have heard this without all of this first 6 episodes of
Right.
Terry laying the groundwork with Viren. Uh,
Right.
I'm curious what your thoughts on that are.
You know what? I think I don't think Viren would have been transphobic by any means. I think he just would have been like, "Oh, this guy."
That's
Just
my impression too, but I don't know, right?
yeah, right. No, I think it just again would have been like, "Oh, Claudia, please, 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 just not him." Like,
That's it, right?
it's
Like it's just
I'm the only one allowed to have an elf boyfriend, okay?
ding ding ding.
Yeah.
Uh, like it's really interesting to think about too, like it because Viren's response here is just very touching. Um, and
Mhm.
it's touching because of the previous conversation too. Like Viren was all up in his feelings and like not letting himself feel. So he's like, get a grip. And then
Right.
Terry processes this whole thing and says, you know what? I'm gonna feel my feelings. And Viren says that's wonderful. It's weird, but it's wonderful. And
Right.
it, I just am. It's there's some tension here that I haven't quite put my finger on why there's tension between. I think that to me it's Viren is becoming more and more uncomfortable with the fact that Terry is probably going to force Viren to encounter some things that he's been trying to push away for a while.
Right.
And so by virtue of Terry leaning into his feelings, it will eventually require that Viren probably come in closer proximity to his feelings. And I think
Mhm.
honestly, that's what makes Viren pretty uncomfortable. But I'm clearly speculating and I don't know, but that's my thought process.
Oh, I think that's a really cool take. I like that. I definitely like where that's going and like what that could imply for future seasons and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I don't disagree. I think, a lot of Viren's first discomfort with Terry was how like Terry would encourage him to, feel what he needed to feel. Like, for instance, like
Yes.
Viren has the panic attack on the
Yeah.
spire, and Terry's just there, hold like cradling his head, being like, "Sir Kai, you're gonna be fine." Like, and Viren's just like, I don't want to feel like that. I don't just want to, like, I didn't faint. What? No, I'm a tough guy.
Yeah.
I don't need to
It's
feel
totally
anything.
normal to have a panic attack.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Terry's just like, it's okay to feel that way. And Brienne's like, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only other thing that I was curious about in relation to this was we can only assume that Claudia is aware and of because we don't see the a coming out scene with between Terry and Claudia. Uh,
Mm,
and so we just presume that that has already happened considering how close they are and how much they care for one another. Uh,
right.
but it's interesting to think about, you know, the again, I am just very much craving the introduction between Terry and Claudia, and then the ebb and flow of their getting together with one another and learning about each other. That seems it's fascinating to think about just because of Claudia's, who Claudia is.
No,
Uh,
absolutely.
I just am like wrapping my head around it is like, oh God.
No,
uh,
no, I totally get that. Um, I've also been yearning for that. Like, I wanna be able to see that, and I want people to be able to see that, and like, get to know how they met one another and how they clicked, especially with Claudia's like
yeah,
really like I can't imagine how she must have felt after the Storm Spire of all things. Like, maybe earlier in the season, like season two, like, she runs into Terry and Terry is like, oh hey, and she's like, hey.
right.
Like, meanwhile the Storm Spire, it's like, oh hey, and she's like, hey. Like,
Yeah,
very like aggressive feelings.
yeah,
um I definitely, I hope that that's something we all get to see. I
yeah.
do.
Fingers crossed. That's on my bucket list. We'll see.
Absolutely.
Um, so okay, so we've spent a lot of time on this moment, and it's really it's this build up because it's been kind of building this whole episode
Hmm.
between Terry and Viren. But I'm curious, is there another moment of trust or something else about this moment that we want to make sure we touch on
Like, just on this particular moment or the episode?
on the whole episode? Yeah.
Okay. um oh, I think the lack of trust Soren now has for Claudia would be a good
Wow.
dynamic.
Right. This was huge. And it's not just Soren for Claudia, but Claudia for Soren too. I think it goes
Yeah,
both ways.
absolutely.
Really interesting situation here, right? So like, Soren is over here like trusting this dragon without armor in his PJs, right? And
Yeah.
like totally fine. And then Claudia comes around and he's like, absolutely not, and just starts chasing her down. And
Yeah.
there's a lot going on in this mistrust that there's 2 years of unpacked uh things that contribute to that mistrust. So I'm curious, like what in your mind contributed to the mistrust here?
Oh, absolutely. Season 3, episode 9, when Soren stabs Viren, or quote Viren.
Right.
That, I
Woo-hoo.
think that moment, and also the moment where Soren leaves Claudia
Yeah,
before the big
right
fight.
before that. Yeah.
I think those two moments are like that is like what breaks like the major trust between these two.
Mhm.
Um and then I think Soren wants to trust Claudia, but Claudia no longer trusts Soren, and Soren can't find it in himself to trust Claudia either, especially because she can't trust him.
Well, and part of me wonders, there's a couple things that are kind of wrapped up in this. One is Claudia not trusting Soren because Soren stabbed, Illusion Viren.
Mm-hmm.
Does Claudia think that Soren would stab her, or is it that their relationship is broken because Soren didn't trust their father, who she trusts implicitly? Like, does that make sense? Does it bleed over into thinking that Soren would harm her, or is it that just that their relationship is broken? And I don't have an answer. I'm just curious what your thoughts.
Right. No, gosh, I think it has to be like both,
Mm,
because
yeah.
her the way she admires Viren, and the way she looks up to him, um, it. I think it has a lot to do with possibly, we don't get to see a lot of this or like at all yet, but I think it does have to do with, you know, um, she says, "Please don't leave, not again, don't make me choose." I think
Yes. Oh, what
that
about
whole thing with her mom, you know, she doesn't trust her mom, so she puts that trust in her dad. All of that admiration and love that should be going to two parents goes straight to her dad, like
And you
times
mentioned
two.
this too, right? Like it requires more courage and bravery when you've been hurt before. And
Hmm.
what you're kind of pointing us to is that because of Claudia's experience with her mother,
Hmm.
trust is even harder. And then the fact that her brother left again
Yeah.
is now she's like, it's almost as if her pool of people that she can trust is shrinking,
Hmm.
right? Which
Yeah.
again makes it really interesting that she has this relationship with Terry. And so it's just really fascinating to think about like what uh all the things that contribute to one, this family dynamic between Soren and Claudia, but also just this need almost for Viren
Hmm.
to not just exist, right, to be alive, but
Hmm.
also to, I think that's another reason why she slaps him, is that like in episode 2 when that happens, he's talking about like just let me die, and she's like, I no, I can't.
Yeah.
Like there's too much at stake, because if you leave, then I'm gonna break, because I what happens if I lose this trust too,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. I think,
Oof.
Claudia has this problem where she feels like her family is so special to her that losing it feels like she's losing like part of herself too,
Mhm.
and it's such a complex, like, just like bundle of like trust and like harm and like
Yeah.
just all these different feelings and stuff like that. um it's it's crazy, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
that is. Oh my goodness. So okay, I we can't avoid talking about all these cool things that because they all intersect. And so,
Right.
one of the things that's involved here is earlier in the episode with Claudia, who has, not returned yet.
Hmm.
Viren and Terry have a very different take on Claudia's absence, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so what I really appreciate about Viren's is like Viren just trusts that Claudia can handle herself,
Yeah.
right? And to have that kind of trust from a parent is really beautiful. Because I know a lot, I worked with teens for a long time, and there are a lot of parents that trust their kids zero.
Yeah.
And it's the complete opposite. And Viren's like, no, she's fine. She can handle herself. Um, Meanwhile, Terry it's not that Terry doesn't trust that Claudia is capable. It's just there's something else there. And I was curious about your thoughts on the difference of trust in those
Right.
experiences. Like what they it seems like they both trust Claudia,
Yeah.
but in a different way. And I'm curious what that difference is to you.
I think Viren is very blind to the danger Claudia puts herself in for him. I think, um and hopefully that's something that gets touched on, eventually. But I think he's very like, he he wasn't there at the storm spire when Ibis almost kills her, but Terry saw that. And I think that, like, I think that amount of like, I trust she can handle herself. Like, I'm sure Terry does trust that she can, but there's also that part of him that's like, but I don't trust other people.
Yeah.
I
And
don't trust other people. You
well, I think that's a really good point that I completely forgot about for some reason. I
like
forgot about this
I
huge
think
plot
other
point
people
you
love
lifted up.
her.
But yeah, Terry literally just witnessed Claudia struggling and almost dying. And Viren, this idea of like taking for granted that she can handle herself when he hasn't seen what she's been doing for 2 years, doing like unreasonable, incalculable, terrible things. Um, so yeah, that's really fascinating to kind of consider how again, I think it definitely speaks for itself to remember that Terry just witnessed the fact that she was about to die at someone else's hands. That for some reason slipped my mind, even though it's one of the biggest plots of the season. But yeah,
Was
no,
Ibis? I don't remember Ibis.
yeah. Who? What?
Who? What? I don't know that
Wow.
guy.
Anyway, so it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so can I take us to the dragging for a second?
Yeah, of course.
So there's this moment, and it happens a few times, where when things get scary, um, who do you reach for? In the sense of like literally, like when in that moment, where does your hand go? And
Right.
then also like who do you want to talk to when things get tough?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this really interesting relationship that we see between Rayla and Callum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I found it to be really neat. So the first time it happens is when they walk by this skeleton and Rayla moves in and goes straight to Callum, reaches for Callum, and says, "Are we going to find Soren like this?" And in this moment when like there's this like, oh no, what if something goes wrong? This reaching for Callum, and
Mm-hmm.
then later in the episode, right, when Callum is struggling and like, I need you to kill me, goes and pulls the kill me card, pulls and like goes to Rayla. And
Right.
there's this implicit trust that is between the two of them that despite their history in which Rayla took off and left for 2 years and Callum's still recovering from that, and so is she, frankly. But there's still this like trust that is built between them that is still there. And just I that came up for me when I was watching through, and I'm curious if that resonates with you. Is that true for you in your experience of trust? Like, do you in moments of fear like have this physical reach towards people that you are more trusting of, or want to speak to the people that you're more closer to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, it
Um,
feels true.
yeah, no, for sure. I think that like that physical, like, oh, come closer to me. I'm like, I need you right now. Like, you know, um, it's I think it's very common, I think a lot of people want that, like that physical assurance, when they're
Yeah.
like when their mind is going off somewhere else, like, they want the person they trust to ground them and to like,
Mhm.
just have that person hold on to them and be like, it's okay, we're good. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm,
It's just really touching, right? There's this uh, I think oftentimes it's easy to like put trust in this like invisible thing, but I think we can see when trust is visible too via proximity, right? Who we
yeah,
let into our bubbles, so to speak. Uh,
right,
more frequently. Like I think that um, being closer to someone is literal.
Yeah.
More metaphorical, but like I think that when you're willing to be more proximate and literally be closer and hug and you know frankly be intimate, like that requires a certain level of trust.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's the same thing when you think about it more expansively, like who do you travel with, like this whole group, there's an implicit amount of trust between everyone who's traveling in this group. um, and I think we often don't take that into account when we are with people. Like I think we forget that that is a currency, so to speak, in
Right. Yeah.
group settings. And I think that works as a metaphor for me, like as an actual currency. Again, it costs more for people to come out of the closet. There's a greater tax. And I so like in a way, I haven't this is the first time where I've put like a money metaphor multiple times to trust in an episode. We've talked about trust before on the podcast, but it seems like that makes sense for the things that are going on in this episode. Um,
Sense.
right? In a way. Oh, that was mm, that yikes. Oh no.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, that's great. Ugh. But yeah, anyway, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think the tax and like the money metaphors, I think it very accurately, describes, you know, like the privilege some people have where they don't it doesn't cost as much for some people,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Ugh,
Absolutely.
jerks.
Right? Ugh.
Yeah. Oh well, can't win them all. Awesome. Okay. I have one more moment that I'd love to touch on before we move on, and then I'd love to hear if you have anything that you want to make sure we touch on before that are burning moments. Um, and the thing that we can't, I think, not talk about is Claudia's outburst at Soren at the end.
Mm,
She's giving him the silent treatment this whole time, and then Argivos and then Aravididity uh starts happening, and she just busts. And what we hear in Claudia's outburst is pretty extreme, and
mhm,
um extreme mistrust of elves, dragons, and I hesitate to label it prejudice, right? But I mean,
mhm.
it very clearly is ist. Um,
Yeah.
and it's hard to kind of pinpoint all of the various layers that are contributing to that, because we only have what we can see. But there's just an intense dislike and mistrust
Mhm.
of non-human beings. And what we see is two exceptions to that in her speech, or yes, one in this season and two in this speech. Erebos, who there's this
Right.
implicit trust of, and then also of Terry. Um, and I'm curious why and how these two get the exception to the rule. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this moment.
Right. I love Claudia as a character. She's such a complex character.
Yeah.
And she has this ounce of selfishness to her,
Mhm.
a little bit. And I think her exception is, Terry loves her and Terry gives her love, and she can supply that love in return, and Erebos gives her her father.
Uh,
And it's very like she those these two relationships, she wins with them, right? But like with other elves, like it feels more like a war,
Mm,
And so I think that like that ounce of selfishness that she has is a big part of like, her relationships with Terry and Erebos.
yeah,
And I think she does love Terry, and I think she does care for Terry, but again, it's that she met him on like one of her lowest of lows that she's ever been in her
yeah,
life. She just lost like what probably what she probably sees as the love from her brother, right? That's
yeah,
gone now, and then Terry comes into her life and he's able to like replace a kind of love, right?
yeah,
And it's just she's in such a low place there. Her dad's gone, her brother's gone, she's all alone. And that just them being there is kind of like a convenient like thing to lean on a little bit.
yeah,
And again, I truly believe she loves Terry. She does, but again, there is that ounce of selfishness in her
yeah,
that you can kind of see.
yeah. And honestly, it reminds me of, and this is not a generous view, but it reminds me of um, the belief structures that condone individualism, meaning it feels the same in to me as people who say, I don't hate black people, I love black people. And what that, but I have like but because I have a black friend, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh God.
I'm not racist. I have a black friend. It feels like that, and that's not a that's not a direct correlation. But
Right.
in for some reason that's the vibe I get. And it's I can't quite pinpoint why this experience feels so icky. uh,
No, I totally get it because she's hating on a whole like race of like
yeah,
people,
yeah,
and it's it's like they're all bad because this, but
yeah,
then she's proving herself wrong because Terry's not all bad, right? And
yeah. And it's also hard because like the other person that is not all bad is
ex-
Erebos,
yeah,
who's pretty bad.
yeah, who's pretty bad, right?
Yeah, according to my judgment, right? Right. Um, and so
Yeah.
it's like this really fascinating view into what I think is a very real experience for people, where uh, it feels very easy to condemn a whole group of people and
Hmm.
then believe that, oh, well, Terry's just the exception to the rule. When in
Hmm.
reality, everybody is a unique human, like not even human, everybody is a unique person.
Hmm.
And to ascribe this to the entirety of dragons and elves is very problematic. And that's what Soren's trying to say at this very
Exactly.
literally right in front of her face. And it's interesting that the evidence that she has is not also like it seems like there's a missing click. Like I just want you to, like, do you not see that there's like hello?
Right.
But
It's
yeah,
like that. I can feel it in my bones. It's like, where's the feeling coming from?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know, there's, you can have like an actual history, or you can have a quote unquote feeling in your bones, which is like, just a ignorant way of saying it's because I feel the way I feel and I'm allowed to feel the way I feel.
well, and I think that if we go into like being trauma informed, right, which let's be
Of
real,
course.
Claudia is has a history of trauma. um
Yeah.
we our bodies believe and convince us of things that are not true, based off
Mhm.
of our bodies remember. And when something we encounter, even if it's perfectly safe, if we encountered something that was harmful about that in the past, then
Yeah.
we're going to experience that, and we're going to experience fear, and we're going to have a fight or flight response. And it seems as though somehow Terry's interaction with Claudia got past that.
Hmm.
Whereas every other thing, every other dragon, every other magical creature, every other, non-human person has triggered that response. And
Hmm.
so it's really interesting to me to think about how you can know something in your bones, so to speak,
Yeah,
and it can be wrong.
absolutely. Yeah.
And a confabulation is a lie told honestly. And I think we often let our trauma create confabulations that are outside of our knowledge that we just have no idea aren't true,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
which is tragic and terrifying all at the same time, that we can know something to be true and it's just not true.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
woof.
Again, yeah, Claudia is so unbelievably complex, and of course, a lot of her, those big ignorant parts of her, comes from Viren,
Mhm.
who's I think also experienced a lot of the trauma you're talking about, right?
Literally
So
just
it's
died.
yeah, right. So it's like God,
Yeah, yeah,
it's it must be hard,
yeah,
to be in that position where it's like you have to feel that way because of the things like in your past
yeah,
have just made you feel that way.
absolutely. So I'm gonna offer a book recommendation to our listeners, and then I think it'll be perfect time to take a quick break and then come back for our final couple of segments.
Yeah,
Uh,
of course.
so there's a book that I read last year called "What My Bones Know" by Stephanie Fu, and it is her account. It's a memoir, and it's her account of learning that she has complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it is an incredible undertaking. And if you are into learning about trauma and its effect on the body, especially complex trauma, so trauma over time, I highly, highly recommend people who like reading to check out this book. And if you like listening, highly recommend checking out the audiobook. Um, I definitely think it's worth taking in if you're curious about this subject. And on that note, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I hope that you had a lovely break. We are really excited to dive into our final couple of segments with you. And the first one, right off the bat, listeners, you're well aware, is the Lens MVP Award. And so Ben and Ben are going to duke it out here, and we're going to decide who deserves the Lens MVP for trust this episode. And so, again, for everybody who's listening, this character should, for better or worse, exemplify the lens of trust. And so, Ben, I'm gonna kick it right to you. Who is a character that you would like to nominate for being the most trusting?
I would like to nominate Terry. um
Shocker.
right, I know, it's not like we talked about it the whole time. um no, I think just, again, the amount of trust it takes to tell someone you are still getting to know, and just come out to that person, especially when they have a history of being very ignorant. The amount of trust and bravery that takes is insane.
Yeah. I just again we did talk about it all episode. It's just there's so much involved here. And so uh I appreciate you lifting up Terry because it's really gonna pull a lot of our listeners into voting for Terry. And I'm just saying that like I like winning, and so I really need everybody to listen wholeheartedly to who I'm about to nominate. Just don't discount my nomination just because you heard Terry. So here's the deal. I and this is bear with me, okay? I'm nominating Soren. I hear the just complete shock in your silence here. Okay, so listen, there's no need to be shocked. This is for real. Soren is one of the things I really find beautiful about this encounter with Claudia is that there is an element of trust in Claudia that deep down she is worthy of love, belonging, and has the potential to do good in the world. And when we see the potential in other people, that there's an inherent judgment there that I want to recognize, because I like seeing potential in someone is can be like, oh, I see what you could be, and I'm like, I already am, and that's not what's happening necessarily in this situation, but this idea that I can see who you can become, and I can see that you are hurting and in pain, and I can see that you have the capacity to make good choices. And there are other people who are like, nope, we're going to kill you. Like Ibis did not see that potential. There was no trust there. It was like, I have to do this because this is the best thing I can do with the information I have. And because of his history with Claudia, there's a lot of trust in her potential and what she can do, and the fact that he knows that she has the same past that was colored by Viren's raising them. And I just think there's a lot of trust involved in that. And I, went on a really long explanation of that because I really believe in it. And it's really hard to defend against Terry in this, but you should vote for Soren anyway.
No, I don't disagree that, like, the trust that Soren has in Claudia is absolutely there. And I think, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves
Yeah.
throughout the next few seasons. Absolutely.
And it's tough because we talked about their mistrust the whole time, but like there's a lot of trust there too.
Yeah.
All right, you heard it, folks. I am inviting you to vote for Soren on the Twitter poll. But you should vote for whoever you think deserves the Lens MVP. Yeah, or not. Okay, so we've had our fun. Now is our time to get super sentimental and go into our gratitude session, because gratitude is phenomenal and we love it. And, we know that gratitude is connected to joy. And so we want to experience more joy in our lives. So with that in mind, who is a character in this episode that you are thankful for and why?
I am thankful for Soren for the trust he puts in Claudia.
There it is.
See, I see. Yeah, see, I know. But no, honestly, I have so many siblings, and we have our disagreements and things like that, and they have a major disagreements going on, but him still wanting to trust her and put that trust in her, I can really appreciate. And it's a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. It doesn't work out in his favor, but as we see at the end of the season. But again, him just wanting to put that there and just wanting to trust her and wanting to, wanting to see the good in her, is something that Soren and Terry can actually relate to.
Yeah.
I think Terry, you know, he seems so like okay with all these things. I think he wants to see the good in her, and that's why he continues to be by her side. Especially you see at the end of season 4 where he tells her, that was pretty cruel of you to keep those coins from Rayla.
What a big moment.
Yeah, it's he wants to see the good in her, and so he trusts her to make good decisions, so he trusts her with his opinion, and like saying like, hey, I think that was pretty not cool. Like,
It was
You know,
pretty more than not cool. It was like
yeah,
actively cruel.
that was pretty terrible. And I just, again, I'm grateful for Soren, for also wanting to see that in her.
You heard it from Ben, folks. You should vote for Soren on the Lens MVP. Uh, um, but yeah, no, I also have a lot of siblings. I have six myself. So thinking about like if I were to be making decisions like Claudia, I would hope that my siblings would have the compassion that Soren has when he
Yeah,
approaches Claudia, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm into it. Oh, okay. So for me, I found myself really torn between Viren and Rayla for choosing. Um, particularly because they were so different, but they were both like, oh, this is really important. And so I'm going to you know, honorable mention Viren, and then I'm gonna give it to Rayla. But honorable mention is because I think again Viren's response to Terry this whole episode is just really beautiful, and it's very rare that we see appropriate responses to people who come out, and I'm just deeply grateful for Viren just for the
Yeah,
simplicity in his response. Um, and then for Rayla, I just loathe the you have to kill me trope. And it's one of those things where like there are so many other options. And I love Rayla's response is that just like, no. Because that would be my like I for once we get a response that is like that's exactly what I would say. And not because I think that I'm right about everything, but because like it's really like I felt that was very aware of Rayla of this idea that, you know, just choose a different path. You have been always been about writing your own destiny. And this is a moment where like you need to listen and take a note out of your own book. And I just thought that was really I'm really grateful for that moment because I was like, this is what this trope needs. So I was thankful for that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring up there's so many other options, because there really is.
Yeah.
um
Wow.
yeah, there really is so many options.
Yeah.
um,
Well, we've done it. We have had a full episode of talking about episode 7 of season 4 of The Dragon Prince, which is just we're almost done, y'all. Only 2 more after this. And then what? Well, I'll tell you, we're going to dive into season 4 of The Legend of Korra. You should stop on by if you've enjoyed these episodes. But I digress. So, Ben, you've been an incredible guest, and
Thank you.
I would love to, if you would like to be found, I'd love to have our listeners be able to find you. So, is there a way that you would like to be found?
Sure. Yeah. I My username is basically at Benjamin Callins on everything. It's pretty
Simple.
much that. I'm currently in a very cute musical called My Friend Fabian, where I voice
Ooh,
Fabian, who's one of the main characters. And you can find that at Lonely Bros Tunes. It's a sci-fi musical adventure about two friends who uncover a time-traveling conspiracy in their hometown, created by Mason Draws It and developed by like the Lonely Bros Tunes. Very cool.
I love musicals. I'll need to give that a find out. I need to. Okay. Anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
I have a future collaboration with Caleb Hiles coming up on his YouTube channel.
Ooh, say more.
I don't know if I'm allowed to,
All right, don't say
but
more.
keep an eye out on Caleb Hiles' YouTube channel if you like to listen to song covers.
Absolutely. So check out the YouTube channel, but also check out their social media. Make sure all the social media is being followed. Speaking of social media, you can follow Bending Not Breaking at BNB_pod on all the things, including on like all of them. So like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all the things, Twitter. Speaking of that, we'll have a nice, lovely Twitter poll for our Lens MVP. So we're in. And then you can also find us on Patreon, where we have lots of cool things for our listeners and supporters, including a live monthly episode where you can join me and my co-host for our Bending Not Breaking portion, talking about all kinds of cool things. And our patrons get to choose the lens, so jump in on that. And that brings us to the end. This is the end.
Oh,
Oh no. Well, we'll have to just have you back one day.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
season 5 pops up.
Yes, I would love that.
Awesome. Well, this has been really lovely, and I wish you all the best on all of your endeavors. And thank you for being a part of this. And thanks to all of our listeners, and thanks to our supporters on Patreon for making all of this possible. And it's with that in mind that we come to a close. Until next time, be well and do good.
Thanks so much.